Last night I had the utter privilege to go and see The Church at the Enmore Theatre in Sydney, and I'm so happy to report that this incarnation of the band rocks just as hard as any of the past. This was part of their Already Yesterday tour, in which the band play selections from the first 4 studio albums, and the show ran for nearly 3 hours, and time just went by like that. It was superb. I entered the show thinking that I had fairly low expectations, but was hoping for high reward, and boy, did the band pay back my optimism in that regard. Absolutely sensational evening. Let's get into it and take a deep dive into The Church, the Already Yesterday tour. This was my first time seeing the new incarnation of the band. I had tickets previously to go and see them at Sydney's Taronga Park Zoo in an outdoor setting, but unfortunately that gig had to be cancelled. So I'd spent the interims trawling YouTube looking for clips of the band playing the classics and new songs from the Hypnagogue. And what I saw was a band finding its feet, looking for cohesion. And last night, all of those elements came together and they are a one cohesive dynamic unit. Anyway, who's in the band now? Well, of course, we have Steve Kilbey on vocals and bass. His vocals are melodic and absolutely beautiful. And how the hell does he remember all of those lyrics without an auto cue for nearly 3 hours? And his bass playing is as fiery and unbelievable as ever. On the rhythm section at the back, we have Tim Powles, who's playing percussion, using triggering samples, and also playing some keyboards, which sound absolutely fantastic. And he's joined by the touring drummer, Nicholas Meredith, who really adds a presence and a drive to the band. And the two of them together, Tim and Nicholas, really make a pounding, fantastic, it's an engine that just keeps driving. It's absolutely wonderful. And then also completing the back line, we have Cain, who's been with the band for many years. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He plays great acoustic electric guitar, keyboards, fantastic. And what he does is really fill out the sound and add to that sort of texture, allowing the guitar orchestra down the front, the twin guitar assault, to really rise and build on the top of that. Speaking of which, on the left-hand side of the stage, as you look at it, we have Naylor, who's playing his milky white Stratocaster guitar. And his solos just absolutely soared throughout the evening. And on the right-hand side, as we look at the stage, we have Haug playing the Crockenbacker, mainly the Crockenbacker 12-string, which is sort of like a cross between a Rickenbacker and a Gretsch, which I don't have one, but it's a 12-string. And those rhythm tones that he was getting last night were unbelievable. And also some of those leads that he played, which were furious and kinetic, were wonderful. I absolutely enjoyed it. So that's who's in the band. Now, we have to sort of accept that other people are long gone. And Ian's been in the band now for over 10 years, and Tim's been there for over 30 years. So the suggestion that this is not the Church, I think, is one which is really unfounded. This is just the latest evolution of the band. Absolutely superb. So, the Already Yesterday tour, playing tracks from the first 4 albums. Some friends and I were there and having a guess as to which song would open the night, and the familiar drum sound of When You Were Mine began, and we hooked into that with the drums, and Steve's bass comes over the top, and then Ashley playing that iconic lead guitar line was absolutely superb. Got to stop saying absolutely, by the way. Then we were thrown a little bit of a curveball because they went into Tear It All Away from this single, and also from the US release of Skins and Hearts. And that was an absolute dream to hear, because it's one of my favorite songs that they've ever released. Thrilled to hear it. And on the way home, I had about an hour and a half drive. I was listening to some of the bootlegs that I have, and I realized that on one, it starts with When You Were Mine and then goes into Tear It All Away. So it was just like the old days. Another curveball that was thrown to us was the B-side of Almost With You, and you can get it on this album, which is just a brilliant compilation called Hindsight, and it was Life Speeds Up. Life Speeds Up was an epic staple of their live shows back in the day, but the version that's on Almost With You, the flip side of Almost With You, is good, but it's not like it was in the live setting. So it was so brilliant to hear it done with power and all that energy and ferocity. Absolutely amazing. Got to stop saying absolutely. I'm going to give myself an absolutely jar one of these days and donate my money to the band, I suppose. So let's have a look through the albums. The first one, of course, is Of Skins and Heart. And from this album, they played in the second half For a Moment We're Strangers. Interestingly enough, Steve at one point said, I guess this song is inevitable. And it was The Unguarded Moment. And I have never, ever heard this song played so well. It absolutely rocked. And I'm sorry that if the band is starting to get a bit sick of playing it, because I walked away thinking that this is their greatest single. Not their greatest song, but it's their greatest single. We got Bel Air, which Steve introduces the first song that the band ever played of his. In the second half, we had Is This Where You Live, which was not truncated, but it didn't go out as long and as epically as in the past, and that was fine. And there was an absolute treasure when they played She Never Said, which is, I don't know, I hate to say it, a guilty pleasure of mine from the first album, because the band has sort of seemed to disown it over the years, but it's a great pop song and it was so good to hear. Then we moved on to The Blurred Crusade, their second album. And I must say that before we go on, that in the foyer before the show, at the merch tables, they had some wonderful T-shirts of all the album covers. And I think this one of The Blurred Crusade might have sold more than any other. It's iconic. It's part of their history. It's probably my favorite church album. And they really featured this. I think they nearly played every song on this. They certainly played Almost With You, When You Were Mine, and Interlude was a brilliant version. And that's something I'd like to talk about too, because in some of the longer songs like You Took and Interlude, they did move out into those more epic psychedelic journeys. But the great thing about it was they weren't trying to copy the guitar lines that Marty and Peter had used in the past. Instead, what they were doing was playing their own guitar lines throughout the songs and their own arrangements throughout these epic instrumental moments within each song. And that brought a freshness to these songs, which was really inspiring. And all of a sudden, it was like listening to these songs with ears anew. And it wasn't like, watching a church tribute band or a Steve Kilbey band. It was like watching the church take things into a different direction and different stratosphere. Unbelievable. We got Secret Corners. What else did we get? We got You Took, and I'm not sure that they played Just For You. I think they did. And they closed with Don't Look Back, and we could probably talk about that a bit at the end. But it was a very interesting choice of closer before they came back for their encore. Then we moved on to Seance. And of course, I have the blue cover, but the pink one is the one that is ubiquitous. And this was probably the album that I wanted to hear the most of on the night. And the reason for that, as I've documented on my video, was because I wanted to hear those live drums again. By the way, I should have said at the start, all four of these albums, I've done a deep dive video going through these albums track by track, and I'll leave the links down in the description if you'd like to watch them. So we had Fly, which was ever angelic and celestial, unbelievable. And at the end of Fly, I was hoping like hope that they would segue into One Day, and it seemed to take them a while to do it. They also played the acid lullaby of It's No Reason. And then, unbelievably, they went into Travel by Thought, in which Ashley Naylor excused himself from the stage and stood in the wings for a while. as the band went completely psychotic. We got Disappear from the second side. Electric Lash always comes alive in a concert setting. And they opened the second side, the second act of the performance with It Doesn't Change, which, if push comes to shove, just might be my favorite song on Seance. And it was so great to hear it in concert again, done so brilliantly. Heyday featured a lot in the, there we go. Heyday featured a lot in the second act. We didn't get much of it in the first act, but in the second we did. We got a wonderful version of Myrrh. Tristesse, my God, I was looking at Kilbey trying to sing that and play that bass line at the same time. Phenomenal artistry. What a bass player, what a bass line. A superb version of Columbus. My God, it rocked like you wouldn't believe. Already Yesterday was done well. And then we got a little bit of Tantalized, as we knew we would in the second act. And like what I was saying before about those psychedelic excursions in the instrumentals, Tantalized went off. And this was really a moment for Ian Haug to shine. Absolutely brilliant to see his hand going up and down that Crockenbacker neck in a fury, but still always with Ian with elegance. Would have loved to have heard Happy Hunting Ground. Can't have everything, I suppose, that you would want. Would have loved to have had that, but at least we have it on the Church Sydney Opera House DVD, which was another interesting story because I was so excited when the church decided to play the Sydney Opera House. One of my friends was going to be in the orchestra, so I bought my tickets, and I didn't realize that when the concert was on, I was going to be overseas. And so a friend of mine had to take the tickets, and guess what? They got sick. And so there were 2 empty seats in the middle of the opera house, about 8 rows back, like we were last night, vacant and missing out on that experience. So a couple of other songs I would have loved for them to have played. I would have loved for them to have played Dropping Names from Seance, kind of everything, I suppose. And if we're going to go back into the EPs, I would have loved for them to have touched on Sing Songs and given us A Different Man and maybe A Month of Sundays from Remote Luxury. But we can't have everything. And I say those sorts of things. I say that with love, basically, because when they came back after their encore, Steve says the hits keep on coming, and what they played was Metropolis, and then you guessed it, Under the Milky Way. And I would have loved for them to come out with a bit of Dropping Names right there. So what are my final thoughts about last night? Well, it was educative and it was instructive and it really taught me a lesson. And the lesson is that you can't really appreciate a band fully until you see them live, until you're in that room with the bass drum pumping at you, with the guitars screaming and the texture and the vocals and all those sorts of things. You don't really know a band until you're in the same room with them. And that's kind of like it was for me when I was trying to get into the Hypnagogue album. I listened to it a few times online, but until I got it home and listened to it on my own stereo in my own house, I didn't really fully understand how great it was. And the same goes for the follow-up album, Eros Zeta and the Perfumed Guitars. This is The Church. These are 2 albums by The Church. And if you've been a bit reluctant like I was, I mean, I only really bought the Hypnagogue because I thought sometime down the line I'm going to want it and it's going to cost me $300 or $400. But the thing is, if you've been a little bit reluctant to get on board the Church train, then I really recommend those albums to you because this is The Church. I keep saying it over and over again. And it's important, like they told us by their choice of closer of the main set, to Don't Look Back, even though that's what they'd been doing for 3 hours. My fervent hope is that they go into the studio, record and release a new album, and then hit the road and start touring it so I can make up for lost opportunities to see this band once more, because we're not going to be able to see them forever. And we've got to take those opportunities when we can. Let's go out with a clip from last night, and it's the opening to Tantalize, that iconic rocker. But before we do, Don't forget about my deep dive album reviews on the albums that we've discussed today. The links are down in the description. And I've not only done that, but reviews of the EPs as well. And I'm planning to do deep dive album reviews on all of the church's albums, and Starfish is coming up soon, I assure you. Anyway, if you've liked this video, please consider giving it a like, and maybe even think about subscribing to keep up to date with all those church album reviews. And in the meantime, I hope you're all doing really well. And here's Tantalized. Bye now.